Did Kaaba in Makkah exist before 4th century? One of the recent things I have heard from Christian missionaries, when having conversation with them, is that they say, Kaaba in Mecca did not exist before the 4th century. Some of them even say that the Kaaba in Mecca, where Muslims go for pilgrimage annually, has no history before the advent of Islam. These ridiculous fictitious claims have no basis whatsoever. I shall now bring forth evidences that Kaaba in Makkah did exist in history long before the coming of Muhammad, peace be upon him. Diodorus Siculus, born 90 BC, died 30 BC. Diodorus Siculus was a Greek historian, who wrote works of history in the 1st century BC. He is known for the monumental universal history Bibliotheca Historica. Diodorus is the first known historian long before the coming of Islam that makes mention of Mecca. Reverend Charles Augustus Goodrich, a Christian, was an American author and congregational minister, comments on Kaaba and Mecca. Although he is not fond of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but he is sincere in admitting that Kaaba existed at the time of patriarchs. He writes, among the variety of fabulous traditions which have been propagated by the followers of Muhammad concerning the origin of this building, we find it asserted that its existence is coeval with our parents, and that it was built by Adam, after his expulsion from paradise, from a representation of the celestial temple, which the Almighty let down from heaven in curtains of light and placed in Mecca, perpendicular under the original. To this the patriarch was commanded to turn his face when he prayed, and to compass it by way of devotion, as the angels did the heavenly one. After the destruction of this temple by the deluge, it was rebuilt by Abraham and his son Ishmael on the same spot, and after the same model, according to directions, which they received by revelation, and since that time, it has continued to be the object of veneration to Ishmael's descendants. Whatever discredit we may give to these, and other ravings of the Moslem impostor concerning the Kaaba, its high antiquity cannot be disputed. And the most probable account is, that it was built and used for religious purposes by some of the early patriarchs, and after the introduction of idols, it came to be appropriated to the reception of the pagan divinities. Diodorus Siculus, in his description of the coast of the Red Sea, mentions this temple as being, in his time, held in great veneration by all Arabians. And Pocock informs us, that the linen or silken veil, with which it is covered, was first offered by a pious king of the Hammurabites, 700 years before the time of Muhammad. John Raynell Morrill wrote, historically speaking, Mecca was a holy city long before Muhammad. Diodorus Siculus, following Agatharcides, relates that not far from the Red Sea, between the country of the Sabaeans and of the Thamudites, there existed a celebrated temple, venerated throughout Arabia. Encyclopaedia Britannica, or A Dictionary of Arts, Sciences and Miscellaneous Literature, Colin McFarquhar states, the science of astronomy was cultivated at Babylon, but the school of the Arabs was a clear firmament and a naked plain. In their nocturnal marches, they steered by the guidance of the stars. Their names and order, daily station were familiar to the curiosity and devotion of the Bedouin. And he was taught by experience to divide in 28 parts the zodiac of the moon, and to bless the constellations who refreshed, with salutary rains, the thirst of the desert. The rain of the heavenly orbs could not be extended beyond the visible sphere, and some metaphorical powers were necessary to sustain the transmigration of the souls and the resurrection of bodies. A camel was left to perish on the grave, that he might serve his master in another life, and the invocation of departed spirits implies that they were still endowed with consciousness and power. Each tribe, each family, each independent warrior, created and changed the rites and the object of this fantastic worship. But the nation in every age has bowed to the religion as well as to the language, of Mecca. The genuine antiquity of the Kaaba extends beyond the Christian era. In describing the coast of the Red Sea, the Greek historian Diodorus has remarked, between the Thamudites and the Sabaeans a famous temple, whose superior sanctity was revered by all the Arabians. The linen or silken veil, which is annually renewed by the Turkish emperor, was first offered by a pious king of the Homerites, who reigned 700 years before the time of Muhammad. Andrew Crichton also comments on the Kaaba in his book, The History of Arabia, Ancient and Modern. From the celebrity of the place, a vast concourse of pilgrims flocked to it from all quarters. Such was the commencement of the city and the superstitions fame of Mecca, the very name of which implies a place of great resort. A passage in Diodorus has an obvious reference to it, who speaks of a famous temple among the people he calls Byzomenians, revered as most sacred by all Arabians. Claudius Ptolemy, born 90 AD, died 168 AD. Claudius Ptolemy was a Greco-Roman writer of Alexandria, known as a mathematician, astronomer, geographer. Is another person, centuries before Islam, who makes mention of Makkah. He uses the name Makoraba for Makkah. In the book, The New Encyclopedia of Islam, written by Cyril Glassé, says that Ptolemy, in the 2nd century, mentioned Makkah. Here is what he wrote. Mecca, Makkah al-Mukarrama, lit. Mecca the Blessed. For thousands of years Mecca has been a spiritual center. Ptolemy, the 2nd century Greek geographer, mentioned Mecca, calling it Makoraba. Some have interpreted this to mean temple, from Makriba in South Arabian, but it may also mean Mecca of the Arabs. Ilya Pavlovich Petrushevsky was an professor of history of the Near East at the University of Leningrad for 20 years. He also makes mention that Ptolemy in the 2nd century mentioned Makkah. On the caravan route from Syria to the Yemen, in the Hijaz neighborhood, lay Mecca. Ptolemy, the Greek geographer, mentions it as early as the 2nd century, calling it Makoraba, which is derived from the South Arab word makrab, meaning sanctuary. Michael Wolff said, Mecca lies midway along the west coast of Arabia in a mountainous barrier region named the Hijaz. This narrow tract of land, about 900 miles long, with the Tropic of Cancer passing through its center. The 2nd century Greco-Egyptian geographer Ptolemy called the city Makoraba, the temple. Paul Wheatley wrote, It was its virtual monopoly of Hijaz commerce which made of Mecca, in the words of the Quran, a city secure and at peace, provisions flowing in from every side. But all this is concerned with the expansion of the influence of a city which already existed. The name Mecca, strictly transliterated as Makkah, had been mentioned in the Ptolemaic corpus in the 2nd century AD under the orthography Makoraba, which itself derived from the Sabaean Makaraba, meaning sanctuary. Long before Muhammad, the Kaaba had served as the central shrine of a group of clans, each of whom had deposited its ritual stone, symbolizing its own god, in the sacred precinct. In the book, A Comparative Study of 30 City-State Cultures, an investigation, by Mogens Herman Hansen, in note 24 he makes it clear when Ptolemy mentioned the name Makoraba, that he meant Mecca. Ptolemy in geographies refers to Mecca as Makoraba. From all the evidences which I have presented, from objective and academic sources, it can clearly be seen that it is a fact that Kaaba existed before the advent of Islam and Muhammad, peace be upon him. Sealing my arguments, I refer you to Reverend Charles Augustus Goodrich, a Christian historian, who admitted that the Kaaba existed and was built by the patriarchs. In his own words, he says, Kaaba, its high antiquity cannot be disputed, and the most probable account is, that it was built and used for religious purposes by some of the early patriarchs.